What's up guys, I'm NihongoGamer and this is the AYANEO Air 1S. This is a very small device. The whole point of this is to be a lot closer to something like the Nintendo Switch Lite. If I show you the size of my hand and the size of the device, you can see this is a really teeny tiny device, and the screen I believe is a 5.5-inch screen. This is a device that has not been released yet and is in fact on pre-order on the NihongoGamer campaign. I'm going to be giving my first impressions on it, and then I'll be making a full review when I've had more time to spend with it and make sure that everything works and functions properly. Now before we go any further, you should know that this is technically a prototype unit that was sent to me by AYANEO. I don't have to say anything specific about it, and all opinions are of course my own, and I got to keep the device at the end of the video. So by using a much smaller screen and by packing all of this technology into a very small case with what I assume to be quite a good cooling system, they made the device as powerful as possible without making it bulky and huge. That being said, there is a second version of this device which is even slimmer. That one is called the Ultra Thin and Light Limited Edition, but the one I'm holding here is just the Air 1S Standard Edition. The thinner model obviously is going to be nicer because it's lighter and thinner, but it will have a smaller battery. Now specs wise, this device is running the AMD 7840U. You can double check the specs and benchmarks online whether that is a processor that will run all the games that you think that you want to play, and I'm pretty sure that this is powerful enough for everything that I want to play. Now in combination with this powerful processor, you also have a fairly sizable battery. It's a 38 watt-hour battery, and I believe that puts it pretty much on par with devices like the Steam Deck and the Asus ROG Ally. And in order to maximize your battery life, you have quite a lot of customization when it comes to power profiles. So for example, you can actually press this dedicated button here to open up the AYANEO IS space. I can go into normal game mode, which will put the TDP at 20 watts, or I can also put myself in retro game mode and this will drop me down. You can also change the TDP limit manually using this slider. You can go all the way down to 5 watts, you can go back up to 20 watts, or you can even switch up to smart TDP, which I haven't actually had a chance to test yet. So you've got a powerful processor matched with a reasonably large battery and full control over the TDP, so you can actually extend that battery life as long as possible using the settings. But since it is a very light style handheld, we need to have a look at the controls and how it feels to hold, because even though you can of course use wireless controllers and USB controllers with this, you're mostly probably going to be playing with the built-in controls. And so let's start with the analog sticks. These are Hall sensing joysticks. Now you're not going to really notice a huge amount of difference the first time you try them, because the main thing about Hall sensing joysticks is, one, I believe that you can have a much reduced dead zone on them, but secondly, they're also just less likely to suffer from stick drift over time. Now this is a device that if you're going to be spending like $1,000 on it, you're definitely going to want it to last as long as possible. So Hall sensing joysticks is definitely something I'd like to see in a lot of other handhelds. Moving on from the analog sticks, we also have the D-pad and the buttons. X, Y, A, B. These are just standard membrane buttons, and I actually really like the feel of them. They're quite small so that it fits on this light form factor, but if you've been playing on a Nintendo Switch, then you're going to be completely at home here. What is a little bit small that you might not be used to is the teeny tininess of the shoulder buttons. So you've got the R, B, L, B, left trigger and the right triggers. If you're not playing difficult competitive fighting games, maybe the size of these won't matter so much, but it's something worth noting that these buttons are not as large as they maybe could be. But in my opinion, it looks really nice and it goes with the design and the aesthetic of this top line over here. The triggers themselves feel okay. I don't know, there's something about the angle at which that they rotate. I would prefer if the pivot were a little bit lower. Now before we move on to the D-pad, I want to say there's actually 2 buttons secretly placed in here, which I'm really happy about. Normally on these gaming handhelds, you have 2 buttons dedicated for the handheld itself, and then 2 buttons for your standard options and select or start and select buttons. But the thing is, this is often not enough buttons because you also want to control things like the Steam interface. So on top of running Windows, you're also running IS Space, which you have these 2 buttons for in Windows. And on top of that, if you're running Steam, you might want to access Steam-specific menus. You can see the whole thing actually pushes in like so. And on screen, what it does is it flips on the on-screen keyboard. Okay, so I've got a fighting game up here so I can show you the D-pad. Having a look at this D-pad, you can see it is completely flat on top, and that makes it a little bit difficult to go from left to right. With a D-pad that's flat, you can't just like push up against the concave shape of it. You have to actually press down on it and then press down on it. Usually you can just like slide your finger left and right, and because it's concave in shape, it will just kind of actuate left and actuate right. It does have a pivot on the inside, so there's no need to worry about pressing all of the directions at the same time. But yeah, you're gonna get a lot of accidental jumps just because it's not concave in shape. However, it's not giving me accidental jumps just because of the design. Now what I mean by that is that even with a concave shape, sometimes if you push forward like this, if you push too hard up or you push too hard down, then it will cause it to jump. But you can see here I'm pushing quite liberally here on the sideways directions, and I'm not getting any accidental jumps. However, this is still not a D-pad that I'd be able to use regularly for fighting games, and the main thing is that it does skip neutral down. This happens a lot with generic D-pads. If you hold down forward and then you go from down forward to down back, you can see in the input history over here that most of the time it will skip the down direction. So this makes some combos absolutely impossible to do, and so I would have to bring an external controller with me if I were playing with this. This is a standard, very generic style D-pad that's on here. The button layout is kind of strange. You got these dedicated buttons for the IS software, but the buttons for the game itself, so start and select, they're both on the left side. So if you're used to pressing a button on the right side to bring up the options menu, you're going to end up going back to Windows quite often. This happened to me all the time. Now something you can't really see here just because this is a standard YouTube video is that this has got a very saturated screen. Now I think AYANEO is one of the first companies that was putting OLED screens into their handhelds. And if you love the look of highly saturated colors or just the ability to have highly saturated colors, then this OLED screen is really awesome. Personally, I'm not really used to it, so I'm actually hoping there's a setting that I can change this back to standard colors. And also this is a 1080p screen. Even though it's a 5.5 inch screen device, this is running at full HD. This is not a 120 hertz screen, but it is very, very nice actually, and very, very responsive. Now the thing I want to talk about is ergonomics of this handheld. This is obviously in the Lite form factor, and this is definitely something you're going to be holding with the tips of your fingers, but you still want it to have grips on it so that you don't lose grip of it. And actually, I really, really like the shape of this grip on here. This is not something that forces you to grip your whole hand onto it. It's assumed that you are still going to be using your fingertips, but even though it's on your fingertips, there is enough of a molded ergonomic grip here that whether you're holding it on a table or holding it out in front of you, it feels really nice. And on that point, I also want to mention that it is a really nice height. Now, even though it's a smaller screen, I do find that consoles that force you to grip the whole thing like this, the whole screen ends up just lower and you're just kind of bending your neck down to look at it. I just found that it was always a really good height because instead of holding it down here, I'm holding it up here. It's got a micro SD card slot. I don't have one installed now. There is the headphone jack, which I've been using to record some audio, and also a USB-C port and a USB port on top. So it's really nice to have the flexibility of a USB port here or here in case you've got it on a stand. I believe this is the extraction fan. This is where the hot air has been coming out, and it feels actually quite cool here on the back because I presume that this is where the air is being intaken. If you put it on your table like this, it's gonna have a harder time getting air in. If I'm playing on my lap, I'll be like playing, and then I'll put it down so I can check something on my phone, like look up a guide or look up some technical inputs. And when you put this console down on a table, or if you put it down on your leg, you will suddenly feel like the whole console is starving for air. I don't really know what the solution is for this because this device is so small. I don't even know where they could put other intake fans, maybe around here or on the sides. But just keep in mind, when you put this device on your leg, it will start to suffocate. That being said, if you don't put it on your leg, I haven't noticed any overheating or anything. It hasn't felt hot to hold while I've been playing. It does get warmer, much warmer than something like a Nintendo Switch or a Nintendo Switch Lite. It is a PC gaming handheld. Remember, it's got an AMD 7840U in it, but it doesn't get hot, like painful to hold. It's just like, this is a warm device. Now, one thing I do want to mention is the quality of these speakers. So the speaker performance on here is not great. You can probably see, like, it needed a little bit more space than these tiny slits for the speakers to come out. It's very tinny, it has got completely no bass end, but at the very worst, you can hear the game. And anyway, if you're playing handheld on like a bus or, you know, while you're waiting in the line for something, you've probably got headphones on anyway. That being said, for a device that's over $1,000, I do feel like it needed better speakers. One more thing that I will point out is that there are some games that don't really run so well on this because of the fact that this screen is actually upside down. If I just show you an example here, when I run this game, Hot Shot Racing, I think unless I download a separate plugin, I can't actually run this game in the correct orientation. It will run the whole game upside down. So yeah, you might want to double check whether your game games are incapable of being flipped upside down, or whether you can get a plugin. Straight out of the box, you're not going to be able to play this game unless you flip the whole thing upside down, and then you've got the controls upside down. Anyway, that is something that I will be looking up fixes for in my final review when I go into more detail. But all that being said, my first impressions of the AYANEO Air 1S are pretty good. It has a small screen which is still full HD. It's OLED, so it's got incredible colors. You've got Hall sensing joysticks. I think it also has Hall sensing triggers. The D-pad is not great, but it's serviceable. I actually don't mind these buttons over here. It's got extra buttons that a lot of handhelds don't have. So in addition to the AYA buttons and the main options buttons, you've also got 2 extra buttons that you can program for various things. Also, overall, it's just really easy to hold. I love the shape. Maybe they've just been changing this over time and just constantly refining it, but this feels really nice to hold, in my opinion, especially for a Lite style console. Keep saying console, I mean handheld. And overall, you just feel like you have access to a huge amount of power, but in a device that really does not take up a lot of space in your bag. Just for a quick size comparison, this is a Steam Deck, and this is the AYANEO Air 1S. You can see this thing is just a mammoth compared to the Air 1S. So it's a huge amount of power in a very portable package, but I think the main question you have to ask yourself before you pre-order it is, do you want to spend pretty much double what you're paying for a lot of other handhelds, which are very powerful as well, just so that you can get the light form factor? If you're looking for a light handheld that has the power of pretty much all the big handhelds right now, man, it's hard. I think it's hard to go wrong. Anyway, hopefully that will help you make an informed decision about whether you should go for the AYANEO Air 1S if you're going to be pre-ordering it on the Indiegogo campaign to save $100, or if you're just going to wait until it comes out first. Anyway, that's all I've got time for today. If you want to see more videos on gaming handhelds, click on this video right here. Subscribe if you loved it, like the video if you haven't done so already, and comment below. Do you prefer big gaming handhelds with massive screens, or do you prefer to have all of that same power in a teeny tiny package like this, the Air 1S?